Hey there, Agile strip mall shoe stores, and welcome to another episode of Agile Bytes, the podcast sponsored by Integrity Inspired Solutions, where we build software in an agile manner day in and day out. You know, as we've been thinking about the kinds of things that managers have to deal with or have to know when we're talking about software development teams and agility, it occurred to me that there may be very many people who are in a position where they become the manager of a team or several teams, and they've just never done that before. And maybe it's somebody who was a developer or a business analyst or something like that, a product owner, and now they are managing software development teams, or whether it's somebody brought in from the outside, or it's just kind of the next step in somebody's career. And I thought it might be kind of interesting to go over some of the things that I wish I had understood when I first started managing software developer teams, different practices that I might have known, different ways to think about certain problems, the ways that I think about them now, as opposed to the ways I used to approach them. Because the thing is, when we end up in a position that we've never been in before, and I don't care what it is, whether it's management or whatever job role we're talking about, whenever you're in that position, then a couple of things usually tend to happen. One is we start to feel pretty insecure, right? We might even have imposter syndrome, right? And people react to that feeling of insecurity in very different ways. Sometimes people are very transparent about it, which can sometimes be a double-edged sword. You know, if you've got a manager and they keep going on and on about how they don't really know anything or they don't really know what they're doing and they need you to help them, I mean, it's going to be hard to feel confident that the ship is sailing in the right direction, right? But at the same time, some level of transparency about that is good, right? Some level of transparency about that is healthy. Some people go to other extremes. They don't want anyone to know that they're feeling imposter syndrome. They don't want anyone to know they may not have a firm grasp on what they're doing or what they're expected to do. So instead, they are very performative. And a lot of times they deal with this by locking things down, being very authoritarian, kind of my way or the highway. They don't really brook a whole lot of input and things like that. Now, you may be thinking, hey, I know a manager just like that. Well, it may just be that they're just that way, but it's also possible that that person may feel like they have to do that in order to be seen as competent in their position. Whenever I talk to like an architect or a manager or a CEO or a CTO, and that's just how they are, they're just very much like they're just not open to doing things any way other than the way they want to do it. A lot of times I just think there's someone who's just really struggling right now. And that's where that's coming from. Now, again, some people just have personalities like that, and that might be the case, but they present in exactly the same way, right? So how would you know? So I would like to help people avoid both of those extremes. I think if you are kind of new to the position, it's good to be somewhat transparent to let your team know that you don't think you know everything. You know, my first day in the military, I told the staff sergeant, you know the men, you know what's going on. There's no reason for me to be telling you what you should be doing. I just got here. You know, so it's good to have that level of transparency, but also at the same time, it's also good to have some idea of what you're doing and be able to communicate that without being an extremist about it, right? So I'm going to try to give you some of those tools. And if you are an experienced manager, maybe you've been managing software development teams or other teams for a really long time, I think this will still be helpful, because a lot of us had to learn that kind of on the job, right? And our default in those positions is to do things the way we sort of perceive managers ought to be, right? Or things that we've traditionally associated with management. And when it comes to software development, sometimes those things can kind of get in the way. So on this episode, we'll focus on other things in later episodes, but on this episode, I wanted to focus on 3 fundamental truths about this thing that you're managing that I wish I had known when I started. And I think if you can internalize these, even if you don't fully agree, that's fine. But I think if you can at least chew on these, think about the realities of these as they apply to your situation with software development, I think they could have profound effects on how you go about communicating with your team, about the pressures and stresses that you feel, and how you go communicating to people outside your team about what's going on. So let's dive in. That's a quote straight from ChatGPT, probably. ChatGPT always wants us to dive into things. Everyone knows that. It's like, dive into this, dive into that. So let's dive into my 3 points today. I am artificially intelligent this afternoon. The first thing is I usually encourage managers or people who sort of serve in leadership roles of software development teams to understand that first and foremost, their job is to enable their team to deliver value and to expedite that. Because a lot of times when people come into management positions, they automatically think, well, it's my job to be in charge of people, right? It's my job to tell people what to do. It's my job to hold people accountable. It's my job to make sure that work is getting done and make sure that everyone's doing it right and make sure that people are filling out their time cards and make sure. And if you think about your job and the phrase make sure shows up in your thoughts about your job, pay very careful attention to the end of that sentence, because the vast majority of the time when people say that, they're not saying make sure that we're the best team we can be, right? Make sure that our developers are unimpeded. They're thinking about holding people accountable, telling people what to do, giving people direction that then they go execute. And, depending on your situation, depending on your context and scenario, maybe some of that is part of your job. But I wouldn't put that at the center of how you think about your job. What I think should be at the center is you are part of a team. The team's responsibility is to deliver value to customers, to internal users within your organization, whatever. That's the team's whole reason for being around. That's why the organization is investing money in that team's existence, is because value should be coming out of that team that is worth more to the company than the investment that they're making. There is a whole lot that can go wrong in that equation. There's all kinds of impediments that come up. There's all kinds of things that come up at an individual level. There are things that come up at a team-wide level. There are things that come up technologically, right? We're using old machines. That slows us down. We are developing in some ancient language that Microsoft doesn't support anymore. We've inherited a legacy code base where somebody did everything in stored procedures for some reason. There can be technical things that impede the flow of value from your team. There can be personal things that impede the flow of value. People have stuff going on in their families that are messing with their ability to focus. There are things that could be going on, conflicts going on between employees that might be impeding the flow of value. And then there are process things. There are ways in which your team is working that impede the flow of value, that make it less efficient, that stall people out, that introduce long periods between inception and delivery. I would say that you want to put at the center of your job the ability to address those things, right? It's your ability to make sure that the team is delivering value as freely, as efficiently, with as little friction as they possibly can, so that you are maximizing the value delivery out of that team. Not only do I think that is a more accurate definition of what you're doing, it's going to be more valuable to the organization than any of that other stuff that we normally think of managers doing. I mean, making sure everybody has their time card filled in, is your salary worth that? Probably not. But are you increasing and enhancing and freeing up the flow of value through the teams that are under your watch care? If so, that is worth your weight in gold. That's why the organization put you there to begin with, right? The other thing is it puts you on the same team as the people that you manage. As long as you go into that situation thinking, it's my job to tell these people what to do, these developers, they're lazy, they don't type fast enough, or they sit around and talk for 45 minutes before they write a line of code, and I got to whip these guys into shape, and this, that, and the other thing. As long as you think that that's your job, you are going to have an oppositional relationship to the people that you manage. Nobody likes that. Nobody likes that stuff I just said. Now, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen from time to time. Sometimes those are the hard conversations managers need to have. But what I'm saying is that shouldn't define the center of how you think about your job, is making these people do the stuff you think they ought to do, or that your boss thinks they ought to do. It really turns on its head, right? It's really, I want to support these people in doing what the organization is paying for, right? I want to help them do it because 95% of the time, that's what they want as well. And now we're in the same boat, right? Now we're on the same side. Now we are facing the obstacles to delivery together, right? And their input is valuable in that. And your input is valuable in that. And you're going to bring the expertise whether it's a conflict resolution or whether it's process improvement or whether it's talking to parts of the business that might be upstream or outside the scope of your team, you're going to bring the expertise to get that stuff done, to pave the way, to bulldoze any roadblocks out of the way of your team so they can get their work done, right? Your job isn't to make them work. Your job is to make sure that they can work as freely and quickly and frictionlessly. Cora, edit that to make it sound like I said something smart just there. And to work with as little friction as possible, right? So they can be delivering value to the organization. If you're approaching your job primarily from that point, most of the people you manage are going to appreciate it and want to help you. If you come at it from that other standpoint, nobody's going to like that. Nobody is going to welcome your involvement at that point. The second thing, point number 2, is the people who are doing a thing have the most insight into how it should be done. The people doing a thing have the most insight into how it should be done. So this is something sometimes managers struggle with, especially if they used to do the job that they now manage, is they come into it and they're like, well, I'm going to dictate how this should go, right? I'm not doing software development anymore, but by God, I'm going to tell them how to do it, right? I got all kinds of great ideas about things we should be doing differently and processes and procedures. And, we should all start using Jira because I read a blog about that. And, we have all these ideas about how we're going to dictate or change or quote unquote improve the way our team is working. But again, if you approach it like that, if you approach it from a top-down approach, I am bringing things from the outside into your cosmos and you have to deal with them. It's going to be a combative relationship. You're not going to get buy-in, by the way. Deep cut callback. I have a podcast episode in this series about how to get buy-in with your teams. Check it out. But you're not going to get any of that. It's going to be a combative relationship. What you need to do is appreciate the fact that the people who are actually doing the work have the most insight into the best way to do that work. So by far and away, your bias needs to be letting them decide how to get stuff done, not you telling them how it should get done, and not your boss or your boss's boss telling them how that work should get done. They should be the front line when it comes to deciding how the team should be going about their work. You may have insights, right? You may know things that they don't, that you can share with them that may change the way they think about this or that. And it doesn't mean the team is infallible, right? The team can make wrong decisions. Just because they're the ones doing the work doesn't mean all their decisions are good. And they may be missing larger context that you have, right? And they may not be making good decisions in light of that larger context. So again, it's not that you should never tell somebody how to do something, but what's your focus, right? What's your bias? If I'm managing a team and we're deciding how that team should work, I don't want to decide that for them and then inform them that this is now how we're doing things. I want them to do it. And if there's a problem that needs to be fixed, if there's a problem with the way the team is doing things right now, I don't bring them the other way I want them to do it from here on out. We have a retrospective or we have a short discussion or whatever merits it. And I say, look, here's the issue. How do you want to solve it? Our product owners are not seeing things as soon as they feel like they need to see them. What should we do? How should we change the way we work? And let the people doing the work give you insight into that and forge it with them, as opposed to coming up with your own ideas or even someone else's ideas and bringing it to your team. They're doing the work. They have the most insight into how the work should be done. Again, with the caveat that they're not always right. They don't always come up with the best ways, but you ignore that to your peril. Right? You should not be coming up with the way you want your teams to work, bring it in from the outside. This is perhaps especially true in software development when it comes to the decision to use things like Scrum or Kanban or XP or anything like that. One of the biggest blunders you can make in management is to mandate that all your teams use Scrum or that all your teams do Kanban or even that all your teams are quote unquote Agile, right? It's just not the right decision for some projects and some products. And so the team can be a good sounding board for that. Again, doesn't mean that their decision has to be absolutely what you go with every time, but they will have thoughts on that. And they may be able to inform you that you are about to force them into a decision that will actually slow them down or make life harder for them. The last thing that I want to talk about, and this, if you thought the other two were hard to swallow, then I am very sorry about this one because we hate this one. And that is, no matter what you do, work will still take as long as it has to take. You can't efficiency your way out of the necessary time it takes to complete work. You can efficiency your way out of wasted time. You can efficiency your way out of snags that add cycle time to your delivery. You can add more people your way out of a personnel constraint. But eventually you're going to hit a point where you can be as well staffed as you need to be. You can be as efficient as you need to be. Work is still going to take as long as it takes. And some things just take a long time. Think about it like this. This is a loose analogy. I don't think building software is much like building a house, but it's a point of reference most of us are familiar with. Let's say you had a company who was going to build your house, and you're like, man, I want this house to be done as soon as possible. I see that you have a team of 50 contractors here. I want you to put 500 contractors on it. Do you think your house is going to be built appreciably faster? What if you put 5,000 contractors on it? Well, heck, you should be able to put that house up in an hour, right? Just think of all those contractors doing things on your house. Is that the way it's going to go? That's not the way it's going to go. You know why? Because there's a critical mass of people where now all of a sudden people are just getting in the way. 5,000 contractors can't effectively work on the same house at the same time, right? There's a magic number in there that's far smaller than 5,000, and just adding more people is not going to adjust the time frame like you think it will. The other piece is when you're building a house, there's some stuff that no matter how fast you are, no matter how many people you have, it's just going to take a while, right? Sometimes concrete has to set. Sometimes you have to wait for the plumbing to be in before you can do the next piece. Sometimes you need to wait for the structure to be built before you can start putting wiring. There's all kinds of things that influence how long those things take that they just are. They're just part of the nature of the work, and you can't add people to it and get rid of it, and you can't come up with a cool house building process that gets rid of those things. Why am I harping on this? Because if you are managing a software development team, then you yourself or people that you are accountable to will at some point probably express the sentiment that they would like your team to go faster. Another callback, last episode about how to make your team go faster. Check it out. But they will come up with that sentiment. And yes, absolutely, as a manager, you should be looking for places where your developers get hung up, right? Again, whether it's a process thing, whether it's a technology, whether you've got a dependency on some other team or whatever, you have all these things that add time, that add friction to development and delivery. You should be always looking for those things and sniping them off as quick as you can. Get that wasted time down to where everything is mostly flow time. But even if you do that, the work that software development teams do is difficult most of the time. And there's a lot of thought that has to go into it before we even type a line of code. Some things just take a while to think about, to reason about, and to start writing tests for, start writing code. Things are just going to take as long as they take. I worked at an organization for a while, and they had 4 developer teams, and I was showing the metrics for each of these teams to their director. And I remember one team had a cycle time of like 15 days for most of their things. And he said, what would it take to get that cycle time down to 13 days? And I said, you need to give them stuff that takes 13 days to do instead of 15. Because that team was running about as efficiently as it possibly could, right? And adding people would not make those items go any faster. Making process changes are going to not move the needle all that much because they were already doing great, right? It's just that the work took as long as it's going to take. And as a manager, it is both distressing and freeing to be honest about that and come to that realization. Yes, you can increase efficiency. Yes, you can find where the gaps and obstacles are in development and try to remove them and make things as lean as possible. But work is just going to take as long as it's going to take. And if you add people to it, to a certain point, you might get more out of that team, but that point is going to taper off at some point. You cannot make software development go faster just by adding people and just by cutting things out of your process. Work done well is going to take as long as it's going to take. And so you need to be focused on the things you can control and be focused on removing those and let yourself go. Let yourself off the hook. Give yourself permission to not have to defend the fact that work is still going to take time. Good work is still going to take time. Value is going to take time. And it's just going to take as long as it takes. So these are 3 things. There are more, right? Like and subscribe, follow me for more life hacks, hashtag goals, whatever. There's many more things we could talk about, but those are three fundamental things that I wish I knew before I started leading development teams. And I hope they give you a new perspective on how you go about that as well. Thanks everyone for listening to Agile Bites. Agile does sometimes bite, but we don't think it always has to. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you happen to be using. And if you can, leave us a comment because we'd love to hear your feedback. What things would you like to hear about? What things did you hear that were valuable to you today? You can also head over to integrityinspired.com to sign up to our email list. But that's all for today, folks. We'll see you next time.